Okay, noting that it is 7 p.m. on February 21st, 2024, I will call the special Board of Health meeting to order. We'll explain special in a moment. But since we are doing this virtually, first we'll go around and the board members will note who is present. So Daryl Beardsley present.
Julie Dreyfus present.
Diana Hook present.
Rebecca Honeywell present.
Okay. So we have a limited agenda this evening because there is a potential deadline coming up for the farm roads. Well, both the deadline, but also another meeting, another hearing with the ZBA on farm road homes. And there are issues we have not had a chance to discuss with ZBA just yet. But before we get into the agenda, I'd like to announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And can vote whether we'd like to amend the agenda with that. I'd like to discuss 1 to 2 meetings on Monday evening related to the Farm Road Homes project.
Would you repeat that? I couldn't really hear what you said, Daryl.
Oh, is my connection garbled or?
It's a little garbled, yeah.
Okay, is this any better? Not so much?
It's the same, but why don't you just try again? We'll see.
All right. Okay. And then I'll try closing more applications. I don't know what's up. So there are, I'd just like to discuss the possibility of the board's attendance at 1 to 2 meetings on Monday, February 26th.
I can be present.
We don't need to decide it now. We just need to decide
Okay.
the agenda. So
Okay.
do we have a motion to
Sorry,
add
I misunderstood. Thank
to
you.
the agenda?
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Did
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. Okay, so let's tackle that. There is a ZBA meeting Monday at 7 p.m. It's to discuss Farm Road Homes, and I can't recall if there were, any of the other projects also, but it's potentially the last hearing on Farm Road Homes unless it gets extended, which we haven't heard anything yet on that. So tonight we're going to be talking about what our comments will be for Farm Road. We don't have all of the information in yet. The plans had a deficiency of a Title V requirement or requirements not being made, and Mark can explain that further when he joins us, which will be a little later than usual today.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I can wait till you're done. Finish your sentence. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, my question is, what is the process and who makes the final determination if it gets extended? Is that the zoning board or
No.
another entity, the state?
The primary decider is the applicant.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, and what else was I going to say? Oh, so if we need to do that, so what we're going to be talking about tonight is what we will put in written comments and perhaps also discuss further with ZBA and others on Monday evening. But I'd like to know if members of this board, other members are able to attend such that we could have a quorum, so that if new information comes in between tonight and next Monday, that we could have a chance to vote on whether we all agree or support an issue or a determination about that new information. So I'm planning to be there.
I'll be there as well.
Oh, I can also be there.
Okay, great. So we have the quorum and Rebecca.
And I can also be there.
Okay, great. And then we can relay it. All right, so that meeting has already been posted on the chance that we were able to make it. The other thing is, if new information comes in that's very complicated, you might want, rather than trying to call an emergency meeting, which I don't have, it doesn't really meet the qualifications for an emergency meeting, which is one that wouldn't be posted. We would post it pretty much as we're having it. So I want to propose just to do it as in just in case we need to discuss something. Would 6 p.m. A 6 p.m. meeting, just Board of Health, and then at 7 p.m. we could join the ZBA switch over. Would that be possible? If we absolutely need it. So I'd be willing to do it.
It would be doable for me. I could work from home and then make, yes.
I could do it as well. But one of the things I want to clarify, Daryl, so then if we do not receive the pending information by, I don't know, Friday or whenever, then we would have no purpose to meet at the 6 p.m. time, correct?
Right, right.
So then would we simply remove it? I'm just trying to think for anyone who is in a butter following this, it's really hard for them to know if they should show up at 6 or 7, particularly since that's when a lot of people are coming home. I just want to kind
It
of
is, I'm trying a different time, but
So
honestly,
there is at a different time. I'm not complaining about the time. I'm just trying to
Okay.
make sure that we give people enough time if we are not going to have the meeting.
Mhm.
that they know. So I guess, is that how it would work, is if by the end of the day, Friday, we don't have material to review in advance, we would just simply remove it?
yes, and then we'll have to maybe just make comments at the ZBA meeting about that we didn't have certain information. So some of our decisions tonight, what I'm expecting would have to be conditional on, at some point, the rest of the information is received, and I don't know who would be evaluating it. It's a bit of a confusing situation, I find. So,
Okay, so are
or
we
to
going,
come, town council advised us that we really need to try to, and ZBA, do our best to work with the information that we have. But as of yet, it's incomplete. We've submitted comments. I don't know if everyone had a chance to see what was submitted about the nitrogen loading analyses and mounding analyses.
yes,
So, and that we haven't heard anything from the peer reviewer or the applicant yet. And so am I missing it? I'm not seeing the applicant on, or their agents on,
neither am
which I was rather hoping for, because I was going to start off with questions to them. Ellen, did they ever reply about whether they plan to attend this meeting?
No, I haven't heard a word from them,
Hmm.
but they don't have to tell me, but
No, right, but I was just curious. And they usually don't want to miss a meeting where we're discussing their project. Okay, well, that'll make it a little more difficult too. All right, so
so we need to put that 6 p.m. meeting, Daryl, on the
oh,
20.
yes, so, all right, so
26th.
yes, do we have a motion to set up a 6 p.m. meeting as a placeholder if we need it for Monday on February 26th?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. And I'll note, so we're going to, I'll set up a meeting. So it'll be a different link than the link for the ZBA meeting. Okay?
Yeah.
So maybe, you know what, I'll stop screen sharing. And Julie, I don't know if you have things that if we need to look at something, that might make my connection a little better.
Do you want me to try to screen share? Is that what you're asking, Daryl?
I don't think we need it unless we want to look at particular documents. And I have them, so I could do it, and I have them all lined up and ready, but let's see if that helps.
Did we want to go through, just as a board, make sure we review the floor plans for the different units?
Yes, I think that would be a good first step.
And we did get confirmation on which plans are the final working plans, correct? By email?
We
Yeah.
were told to use those and the chart. Whether they're the absolute final, I could envision that being a condition. You know, if we make a decision, it's contingent upon it having this number of units according to those plans. And the other thing I did want to ask them is about the attic and the basement spaces, which are not included, you know, if there are such spaces, but there's a down staircase in every unit model. From the first floor, I presume, to a basement. So something will be there.
Should we pull up those floor plans, or has everyone else had time to review them and note them?
I think it'd be great if you pulled them up.
Perfect. Daryl?
And let me know if you need that, so,
I am not an experienced screen sharer,
okay.
so if you're trusting me to do this, just buckle up for a second.
Okay.
Because
And you know what, if my audio is no clearer, I can just keep sharing, because if
your
cutting
audio,
out sharing.
yeah, that now I have to go do some type of an adjustment in settings. Do you want to, it was.
I'll go back to share. That's fine.
See if it completely bombs, then I will try it again, but the architectural design plans.
So,
My apologies. I have a new computer.
no problem.
Nothing is configured right.
And mine is ailing. So. Okay. Let me just get the right scale.
Yeah.
So here's the chart that says how many of each of the
Right,
lots.
so there's 4 different units. For 32 units total, there's 3-bedroom front load, a 3-bedroom rear load, 2-bedroom duplexes. So that's, we'll see side by side, 2 bedrooms, and then 2-bedroom cottages, which are detached standalone units.
Okay.
All right, so we're looking at the 3-bedroom front load. And as you noted, there are no, there's no 3rd floor plan depicted, so we would normally assume that to be unfinished space, but that would be nice to confirm. And the same for the basement. When it's not depicted, we usually assume that to be unfinished, but that was one of the things we would like to confirm.
Yes, because I thought I saw on one of those homes that there was a window up on that 3rd floor. Or maybe,
Exactly. So that was one of the things when we get to the next slide. So I don't know if anyone had a question about the spaces there. Can you go back up? I'm sorry, Daryl. Can you go? We're on the front loaded or the rear loaded? We're on the front loaded. Is that the first one?
This is front loaded.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We're already starting off great. I just wanted to note for the board on the 2nd floor, do you see the office space there? It does not meet the 70 square feet requirement for a bedroom by Title V. And so that's one of the things that I would like to see stay the same. Otherwise, we're potentially looking at a third bedroom if that were to be changed in size. Does anyone have feelings about that?
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
That, you know, what to others, a little bit of shifting around would seem like no big deal.
Yeah,
This would be.
yeah, I agree that we would have a different issue there.
Okay.
And it,
So Mary, do you have a question on this at the moment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had a clarifying question, Julie. Thanks for pointing that out on the square footage. I appreciate that. What is the room count that you guys have on this 3-bedroom front-loaded home? Like if you were, just calling room counts on this, what would it be?
it would probably come down to how we define the kitchen and dining between
Yeah.
7 and 8.
Mhm.
Because does Title V say if it's 8, it presumes that there are 4 bedrooms? No? It's only
No,
if
you
those,
can
it's only
have
if the criteria is met that you were talking about with the square footage and the window and the, what was the other issue?
the rooms on the second floor is Sherborn specific, and there are 3-bedroom, 8-room homes because that was pretty standard for ranches at one time.
Yeah.
So that is a state level kind of a deviation of
Okay.
sorts from the divide by 2 and round down formula.
Okay, but really you guys haven't decided if the dining and the kitchen are 2 separate uses or rooms.
They've labeled it as 2, which we've deferred to that in the past for developments of this sort.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think that's the way it was handled at the Fields.
thank you.
So Diana, the point that you made too was on the 3-bedroom rear loaded home, and we're looking at
Well,
the front.
there was a different view of the home where the
Yes.
back
Yes.
space, I thought I saw a little
that's-
window and it
And
was
that's
like,
for the
"What?
rear loaded.
That's
So
the one. Yes.
exactly. So this is the case for both, I think it's both the duplexes and the rear loaded homes. If you look above the garage, it appears that there is standing height space above it, and it's not depicted on the floor plans. So I think we would want confirmation that that is not finished space.
Yes, and just decorative.
And well, if it's completely unfinished, just storage space where, the Halloween decorations go, we don't have an issue with that. But we would want to make sure that was not getting finished in the future.
Though I'm looking at the space and I don't think I saw on any of them that there were actually stairs going up there, but
It appears it would only be accessible via the garage when you look at the external, yep.
plan,
So
yeah.
here's and so we have the same situation, actually different here for the second floor plan for the office. While that still doesn't meet the 70 square feet for a bedroom, we also do not have privacy. This is kind of a functional suite where you have to go through bedroom number 2 to reach the office. So I am way less concerned about, as long as that stays the same, concerned about that being potentially converted to a bedroom.
I
Does the
agree.
loft have a full wall along the stairs, or is that a half wall?
Yeah, I had a question on that also. 'Cause it's like,
Sorry to interrupt.
I was looking at that as a half wall. This is this looks a lot like what we saw at 59 North Main with those loft spaces in terms of how it's set up.
Mhm.
If that is a good this is the rear loaded. And in the case of 59 North Main, those spaces, in order to create privacy for them to be converted to a bedroom, you would have to close off that stairwell, add walls, add a door. So it would require work to be done, which it looks like that's the case here, but it would be nice to confirm.
Right, this is hinting at being banisters, but. So this one is clear 3-bedroom. And then 4, 5, and 6 rooms. Okay. Any other questions from the board on that or comments?
Well, I
Is
think
it-
those are 2 questions, right? The garage and the loft.
Oh, back to this one.
We were just looking at the floor plans for this one. Yeah. So we're
Did you
on,
want to, you said,
no, I was summarizing,
oh, okay.
but maybe that was confusing. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, hang on a second, Daryl.
Let's sit down first.
We're doing the outside of the duplex.
Mhm. So similar.
Is
Mhm.
there, I think there are 2 depictions for this one. Is that correct? No, go back up, Daryl.
Let's see. Yeah, no, there wasn't anything before. Oh, well, I guess there's this.
Okay.
Sorry.
Which is an alternate view. Okay. So what did I note here? There was nothing here that I found concerning, even though I'd like to again look at the outside to see if there's above the garage, but wondering what the other members of the board thought.
We'll go down to that in a moment. Right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms. And 1, 2, 3 here. And both have 2 bedrooms. Quite straightforward,
Yeah.
2 bedrooms.
And then Diana, was this one that we also wondered if there was there an above garage space? No, Daryl, if you would scroll down one more. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, this also had that. It's not clear about above garage.
So same thing, and then forgot to point it out. So all of the staircases here in all of the plans have that little squiggle there. So this is going up to the 2nd floor and then in through the door and down, presumably to a basement.
Okay.
And then on the plus side, on the 2nd floors, there's just a down indicated, so there's no up staircase to the attic. At least not shown.
Yeah, so there must be some other sort of access to that attic than storage space?
Maybe one of those sort of pull down stairs or something through a trap in the ceiling.
Mm.
So I guess these will remain as questions to ask.
Daryl, can I ask a question? It seems like the
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, the downstairs would have to have the mechanicals because they don't seem depicted anywhere else, I guess, unless they were in the garage somewhere. I mean, I don't think that's feasible, but I imagine there is some basement for mechanicals because I don't see them in the plans otherwise, right?
Yes.
And then the second question I had is there was a nook that in the previous sort of May 2022 version on one of the duplex's 2nd floors looked like it was large enough to qualify for a bedroom. And I just, it would be good if we could just confirm that measurement that it sort of falls below the threshold of a bedroom.
Right, and those older plans, they actually had what they called a bonus room. That was huge.
Yeah, that was over the garage, but then there was
Yeah.
something also called a nook in the duplexes. And I think it's just at
Okay,
the, next to one
we
of the bedrooms.
received word from Mr. Murchison today to disregard the May 2022 diagrams. What we did not get to confirm is whether what we're looking at now are the only options to be considered. And we do need information about the basement and attic.
So maybe just confirm the measurement on that space formerly known as the nook in the plans not to be considered. It doesn't look like the size changes. I mean, if the size changed, that's fine, but if it didn't, then it's a space that could be closed off and considered a bedroom, I think.
Which,
Yeah,
on the second floor, Mary?
Yes, on the second floor, one
Can
side
you-
of the duplex has that sort of landing area next to one of the bedrooms. That
Daryl, can you,
yeah, I'm going to.
oh, sorry,
Sorry.
I kind of discarded those before, but hold on. I do have it somewhere.
no, you can just scroll to the one that you're on right
yeah,
now.
why don't
It's
we look
still
at
in
what
there.
we're- Yeah.
It just
Oh,
doesn't
it's
have a
still
it
in
doesn't
there?
have a room name on it.
Oh.
No, wrong direction, Daryl. Other way.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on the farthest right on the bottom next to bed 2. I think just want to confirm what that size of that little space is. If it's the same as, an office and it didn't qualify as a bedroom, then that's fine. But if it's big enough, then
Is my cursor where you're talking about?
correct. Yep.
And are you talking about this out here?
Yes.
Okay, that,
That looks very small.
yeah. And it is, right, it is very similar to that office and it's open at the moment. So, right. I'll say that given the number of times that new owners of homes in town come to the Board of Health with a project in mind, and when we review the status of the house and find out that it had a lot of work done, maybe out of permit, because it no longer matches their septic system, we know it's very disappointing and shocking for people to find out that there's a disconnect between those features. So if people went through the proper process and we're going to be walling off something, the standard procedure in town is goes to the building department, who then checks with all the other departments to see if there's anything relevant that to any of the other boards and committees in town. So that would be caught. The problem is when it's done without permits. Like anything, I don't think anybody really wants electrical work done in their home without a permit because of certain obvious safety issues. So this is just a more invisible safety issue.
Well, can you see what the width of the bed 2 is and then just see what the delta from 21 feet is? I can't really read that number. It's too small for me.
It is 11 by 6 and 10 by 6.
All right, so if you
So
give 6 inches for a wall, say 12
this
feet.
doesn't look like a single bed, but if you tried to fit that in here, it's not easy.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Assuming the beds are to scale. Which
Okay,
they look
the reason,
negative.
the reason I flagged this was that, if this goes to some deed restriction where they say no bedrooms can be added, I think it's a lot different for Mass DEP's, kind of giving a deed restriction to a single home on a single septic than it is to giving to 20 duplexes where there's a potential for 20 extra bedrooms to be added. So I just think we should be careful to make sure that, there is no opportunity for that to be turned into a bedroom.
I'd love to say that we could make it so that there's never any opportunity for inappropriate additional bedrooms, but we certainly do the best that we can.
Yeah.
Should we go to the 2-bedroom cottage, Daryl?
Yes.
And so we have the same questions about unfinished basement,
Mhm.
attic, but otherwise this is pretty straightforward. It looks consistent with, for me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see any difficult issues offhand here.
Do we know if there's going to be any challenges like building that basement, like having to ledge or other rocks in the area?
And there is apparently a fair amount of ledge on the site, as was noted in one of the reports provided by Claw. So that's certainly a part of the regulation I'd like to see respected, is any kind of bedrock disruption, precautionary measures, best management practices around that. For some other projects, the same applicant has mentioned that if bedrock was encountered, they would not put in basements, but right, it does beg the question of where the where the utilities would end up going.
Would be the garage if it's big enough.
Mm,
I'm thinking of my parents' California house where the utilities are in the garage, but it's a huge garage.
Hmm.
It's also warmer in California. Well,
Yes,
parts of California
Yes.
are warmer. So they didn't need to kind of protect the equipment from the elements. It's different. And it looks like this doesn't have a garage for this particular one. So that could be something that in our recommendations advise that, some of these approvals are, again, conditional to these plans staying as we see them now.
Yeah.
And if there are changes, it needs to be revisited.
Maybe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Maybe since there's this question about the rooms and the size of the bedrooms and the extra room, and because it's a series of condos and cottages, it could potentially lead to, many more bedrooms if people are violating the deed restrictions or any regulations we have that it's impossible for us to enforce. Maybe we should just the board should count them as bedrooms and just require the septic capacity for those as a backup plan, since there isn't any other recourse
But
that
none
would
of the spaces
protect public
depicted.
health.
I'm sorry.
What?
I'm sorry, Rebecca. I thought you were done.
No, I was saying
Everything's
that would, in order to protect the public health, the septage and potential contamination, especially if there's ledge and it's going to be tricky for drainage and things like that.
But none of the spaces we have identified meet the definition for a bedroom on the second floor. I don't think we can count those as bedrooms when they don't meet the Title V definition of a bedroom.
And also, it's very important for us to evaluate these as we would any other property in town.
Of course, I'm just saying that maybe when we're evaluating these and the extra space that we're referring to a few minutes ago, maybe we should be cautious and conservative in our assessments.
I think
I
I'm
don't
more
believe-
concerned about basement or attic spaces that are not depicted and just getting official confirmation that these are not finished spaces. And then that would be the condition we would add to the ZBA, is that these are not to be finished into bedrooms.
Right, and I believe we've seen all the way homes where
Mm.
They can be large, they can have a little landing-like area, which is pretty much what this is. And it's not currently set up as a bedroom if these things that usually depict banisters and posts are actually that in the final plans. So for us to call it a room now as a precautionary measure, I think would be overstepping what
Yeah, I agree with that.
to do.
Looks like Mark is coming on.
Yes.
So, and just for the rest of the board, I went through, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, when we get to the wells, but I did go through for each of the wells and looked at the units that were associated with it and the bedroom counts and made sure that the bedroom counts came out as presented, and it did, as well as the allocation to each of the wells, but we can talk about that more when we get to wells. All right, that was all that I had for the floor plans, Dale. It was just kind of making sure we were on the same page and discussed what our concerns or conditions were.
Okay. So, let's see. So Mark, I see, are you fully connected?
He just came on. He might be trying to get set up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of something short.
I'm here if you need me.
Oh,
apologize. I
okay.
was listening in for the last 10 minutes, but now I'm at my computer base, so I'm all set.
Okay.
Any question?
Good. So you heard the general gist of room count. So
Yeah. And he is proposing, the proposal is for 12 3-bedroom units and 22 bedroom units is what's being proposed.
Yep.
all right. So do we want to tackle the hard part of the septic system issues first, or the more mysterious wells, which we've discussed a bit, the wells in the past, by way of some of the information too about the PWS alternative. I almost feel like we should do the septic system, since although that's the most up in the air of anything at the moment.
Let's do that, Daryl. Let's tackle it.
Yeah. All right. So let me take a moment. If you want to, Mark, if you want to give a little summary of where it's at, and I'm going to actually, what should I pull up? The septic plans? Septic plans first, the list of questions we already submitted.
Most likely the septic plans might be helpful, and then
Okay,
you have the letter that I sent out on the present status of the septic plan.
okay. Since my computer, as you can tell, when I even move between pages in a document, it takes forever for it to focus. When I try to open up the septic plan, it's going to have similar problems. It'd be really slow, like really, really slow. So, Mark, have you ever shared screen?
Maybe once, but quite a while ago.
All right,
Not
well,
on the computer.
tell you what, you start talking and I'll try to get that thing on screen and clear while you're doing that. So you can just give a verbal update on where we are while I'm doing that.
Will do. So we received a response back on my letter I sent out on the deficiencies for the septic system, and I received a response from the engineer on February 2nd. We actually received it on February 5th, and then I responded to that with my review, and then I sent a letter back to the engineer, which he did receive last Friday. So that would have been February, I think it was the 16th. So if you want, I'll draw that letter up. I thought I had it on paper. I have it electronically. 1 second, but I can go over the status of that.
Yeah, that would be good to update everyone.
be right with you. I just want to make sure my microphone's on so you don't have all that dead air, they call it, I guess. But let me just, that was sent Friday, so I should be able to find it quickly. Yeah, I sent it to the owner as well as to Deishang, and it addressed my review of what they provided, and noted that the water lines, which were requested in item number 7 of the efficiency letter, sent out February, that was back in January, have been provided on the plot plan, but I did ask for additional details on the depth of the water lines and if there are any water shutoffs, and that they be provided on the plan. And a profile would be helpful as well. A suggestion was that if they have any paved areas, I'm not for sure if they would consider putting in double piping. So that way they could sleeve the water pipe into another sleeve so it'd be easy to repair. But that is not a requirement, a suggestion. And then item number 9 was to see a groundwater profile. And it's very difficult to determine the groundwater determination at the septic tanks the way it was provided. I did ask that the detailed profile was to show groundwater at the depots, and at it mentions SLTP2 and SWTP3 as part of the I guess the test pits that they were using to extrapolate the groundwater to the septic tank and pump chamber area. So typically a groundwater profile will be provided from those test holes to the tank area, so we can determine from point to point how they derived at the groundwater at the septic tanks and pump chambers. Also noted that would also have to show the Frimpter method for any adjustments that were utilized, and that we need to see that formula as well. Item number, just so you know, the other items deficiencies were resolved. So the ones that I'm talking about are ones that have not been completely resolved. Next one be number 10. And note E, which was part of my deficiency letter. And it just goes to say the soil testing shown on the plot plan does not correspond to the field soil evaluations. Again, I know this has not been resolved. I have not had, the engineer has not offered to meet with me on my notes. I did share, and they shared their notes as well in our field test books. Whatever the case may be, it's a matter of looking at the notes. I did notate in my soil test book that from the soil web data that on site this was determined to have Hollis soils, and this is from the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Hollis soils was 35%, rock outcrop at 30%. I did hear someone say about the basements that you may hit ledge. There could be that opportunity since there is rock outcrop out there as well. Charlton at 20%, Canton at 10%, and Montauk at 3%. With that said, those are the first two primary soils are Charlton and Hollis and Charlton. And those soils are a till, but a till can be a loomy sand as well as a sandy loam. But I don't know if we'll ever get to resolution on what they recorded and what I recorded. But again, I just wanted to offer what also the survey showed back when they were evaluating soils through the USGS. Number 14, the elevations of the percolation test should be shown on the percolation test table. They're shown underneath the depots where the perk test is mentioned, but again, it's easy to transfer that information to where they have the separate location on the perk test. Number 15, refusal was determined in the field for depots 5510 and 5510 AN. And again, I'm asking that that be shown on the depots. And it has not yet been shown, but it was mentioned in my deficiency letter. Let's see. And then the following were some other pending items. I put the groundwater adjustment data formula, as I just mentioned before, with the groundwater at the septic tanks, needs to be provided, and I need that data shown on the plan. For where they do mention that they did a groundwater adjustment, and it's noted on depot observation 55-2 and 55-11, shown on sheet 4 of 10, but I just don't have the formula or the data to know what comparison well they were using. Just so you know, FRMTA method is a method used to determine groundwater adjustments, and the engineer will utilize a well that's similar to the area that they're testing. And that's how I'll know which well they used. There's various wells out there that can be used, but they should be using a well that has the same type of elevation as well as the same type of soil. And I have not yet seen that. So again, that's something that can easily be done. The engineer can forward that to me.
And-
And I made a quick comment. I just put in review of the revised septic plans. It was determined that the required maximum cover allowed over the septic tanks, pump chambers, and soil absorption system have been exceeded by 36 inches, which is not in compliance with 310 CMR 15.2217. And the profiles don't show the elevations either on over the septic tanks, pump chambers, or the field. So I did ask that they put in the actual profile, especially since they're using stepped soil absorption systems utilizing Caltex. So that makes it very easy to see how the grades are corresponding to the location of the Caltex, which is the soil absorption system, as well as the pump chamber and the septic tanks. And that was pretty much what was written in that letter. All said. Thank you.
Okay, for folks, I'll just mention when Mark was talking about the reference wells, for anyone joining who hasn't been through the FRMTA method before, the USGS has monitoring wells across the country that they have evaluated the groundwater levels for decades and decades. Therefore, if you can find a well that's similar, it's in a valley, it's on the side of a hill, what have you, different types of soils, you find a well that's similar to what you have in your region, so that hopefully it's similar rainfall patterns. And then you can see what the measurement is in your well, compare it to the USGS, and then the FRMTA method is a way of applying an adjustment that would, using that, the historic high level in the USGS well, you'd be able to make a calculation to adjust the measurement that you saw at a particular time of year. Maybe it's a dry year. So the USGS well would be low, and there would be an adjustment factor, and you would apply a similar adjustment factor to the well on the property. So historic high is important. In the report submitted by Claude, they, at different places, they referred to different numbers, mostly focusing on what they observed in test pits, but that's not reliable. And it needs that adjustment, because we're not just looking for water you see in a moment. We're trying to find out what's the highest that the water gets. And that's really important for a septic system, because if you put it somewhere that happens to be dry this year, but then the groundwater rises up to the septic, your water will be very contaminated as a result. So, so that's a big concern, and that kind of confusion in the report I found very difficult, because different numbers were talked about in different places, and which was finally used in the calculations was not clear. So Mark also mentioned about the soil types and what have you, and we had a chance to look at photos that Mark had from when he was in the field observing the test pits. And it was very clear visually that there is till below the sandier soil types. And that hasn't been accounted for in much of what their evaluations included for data. So that's something that is outstanding. And then the Title V non-compliance that Mark just mentioned, where the cover over the system and or tanks is too thick. If we had to make a decision right now, we could not approve these, even under Title V. So I would imagine that in whatever we try to write up, I'm hoping someone will join me in writing things up before the Monday meeting, so we'll be ready with something. But I guess he's stating that it's not approvable at this time, but conditional to if new plans are submitted that meet those requirements, then blah, blah, blah. So it's going to be tough to write that up if they close the hearing on Monday, because we'll just be speculating, which is not a good way to go about it. Oh, and Mark, I had a question, the groundwater evaluation. So normally when you're trying to determine groundwater flow direction using slope, one would use 3 monitoring wells, sort of for triangulation, and then look at the levels. All I found in the report, unless I missed something, is that he was basically using 2 test pits and observations in those test pits.
And that's the way I read it, and that's one of they were the ones with the adjusted groundwater. So I think it'll be clearer when the engineer does submit a groundwater profile for both the leaching field area, which is stepped, so not every Caltech unit is at the same level, and you want to make sure the groundwater from point to point corresponds to the Caltech units. Those are plastic chambers that they're deciding to use for the septic system, and that way we can see clearly if the one point of wherever that deep hole is to the next point, that the groundwater is at least a minimum of 4 feet between the bottom of the Caltech, the bottom of the leaching area, to the groundwater. So that's where those profiles, which we require for all plans that come in with step units or trenches, to be provided, and it does make it. And they can also add the final grading over that too, because there's so many dynamics to these step trenches that you want to make sure the exact elevations are noted on that profile for both groundwater and for the cover material.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about this general vague septic review that we had?
Mark, your explanations were very helpful. And thank you for going through that.
You're welcome. And there's obviously some other information that I am waiting on our technical advisor, which is the Tetra Tech, in respect to groundwater mounding, mass balance analysis. I would hope the board would request that Tetra Tech, I don't know if they're here tonight, that they come back with a report to indicate their view of both the mass balance analysis as well as the groundwater mounding, which is a very technical process that has to be completed. And I would hope that the board consider in situ, which is in the field testing, to make sure that the appropriate tests are done, not in a lab, but right in the field. So there's any chance of compaction or various soil layers that could be reviewed right in the field through the appropriate analysis.
Because right now, I think their analysis used only the sandier soils and didn't account for the glacial till in their mountain.
Correct. In fact, I was there, but they took samples where they wished to take samples. So it was their decision to go for the soil that was sandier than might have been, it had a little more loam in it, which is usually the silt. So, and from my pictures, as I showed to Daryl, you can see there is a variety of soil at this location for the soil absorption system.
Okay, Brian, do you have a question or comment?
Hi, good evening. Brian Moore. I live at 49 Farm Road. And just for the record, I am a practicing geologist and hydrogeologist with over 30 years of experience working in casing contamination all over New England, New York, mid-Atlantic states, Midwest. And some of the values that were presented and we've spoken to this in several submittals to the ZBA, which may or may not have been brought in front of your actual board. Some of the values that were used by the engineer in this design process are just absurdly off the mark. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that because I believe it, other LSPs believe it, other geologists believe it, and other hydrogeologists believe it. Mary and I have spent a tremendous amount of money and time and effort to have these plans reviewed by so-called experts, because when we spoke to these issues, predominantly because we're just a neighbor, it's taken as a NIMBY type of situation. But I just want to make sure that everyone here on your board understands that I very much have worked very hard to make sure each and every scientific principle employed by the applicant is has some grounds in reality. And the fact of the matter is the application as a whole is really untethered to a lot of standard principles of hydrogeology and of geology in New England. We finished today a letter that we were waiting for Scott Horsley's final review of the septic system. And if you're looking at the page in front of you right now, you see that giant septic that's, I don't know, 70 some odd bedrooms. Our well is just out of frame conveniently on this plan. Our well is basically going to run foul once the people who have moved into 53 Farm Road start flushing their toilets. And the only place we have left on our property to put a well is right where the north arrow is in the left part of the frame there. Thank you, Daryl, or whoever's navigating the mouse. This is basically the only place left on our property for us to get a drill rig into and install a well for drinking water. I don't know what else I can say. Scott Horsley's review of the plan shows that everywhere along our property line, 10 milligrams per liter is going to be exceeded. It shows that the model Deshang used to model mounding was misrepresentative at best. And it shows that it's almost impossible to condition approval of this 40B project because of the laws of fluid dynamics, physics, chemistry, things like that. So I encourage your board to just write up as many conditions as are possible, because if it's not during the process of building this, it'll certainly be at the time when the applicant no longer is involved with this property, that our well is going to be fouled, the well at 53 Farm Road is going to be fouled, the well at 55 Farm Road is going to be fouled, that you're going to have nitrates flowing down Sewell Brook, and by then it's too late and there's no recourse. So please read our submittals. Please especially pay attention to the submittal we made earlier today. We spent a tremendous amount of time and effort on it, and we very much appreciate all your time and effort in your deliberations on this project. Thank you.
So I'll note that the board did submit comments for the peer reviewer for issues that we would like addressed. And certainly after reviewing the various analyses that have been provided so far that are on the land development project page, yeah, the methodologies were not always clear. They did not always appear consistent. They did not seem to always be in line with what standard practices are for these kind of evaluations. And I'm rather hoping that the peer reviewer will be able to run their own analyses with the data available just for comparison, perhaps using ModFlow or something that's not a spreadsheet that's only provided in PDF form where we can't see what the underlying equations and assumptions are in that, and trying to back calculate from that. I mean, I guess one could make guesses, but it's not the ideal way to go about it. Normally that would all be presented, and in fact, DEP has guidance about how to do these kinds of analyses, and they have tables that show how you list out what all the assumptions are and the values, and arrive at something as an example. So I'd rather see something like that. It's like trying to evaluate a black box in some cases at the moment. So Rebecca, you're on mute still. No, we're not hearing you. You're not on mute, but we aren't hearing you. All right, while you're figuring that out, I'm just gonna go over to the Tom Trainer.
Thank you, Daryl. I just want to add a couple more comments, maybe on top of Brian's, specific to the septic effluent concerns I have. If you go to now or later, it doesn't matter, to the nitrogen loading analysis, I have a few concerns. One, the tables, I'd point you to table G2, table G3, kind of in the back of one of the documents, but it's not important. I'll just reference that for the record. But there's lists of nitrogen concentrations, and I assume it's nitrate nitrogen concentrations, but that's not indicated in the table, so that would be a question. But assume it's nitrate nitrogen, which the EPA and state standards for drinking water are based. The down gradient receptor concentrations in table G3 range for different assumptions between 3.89 and 6.95 part per million or milligrams per liter. I point that out because the EPA standard that, by the way, was set in 1975 for nitrate, and other organizations across the world adopted that, but later dropped it, or excuse me, lowered it. There's concerns of nitrate in drinking water much lower than 10 milligrams per liter. Right next door to us in Dover, their limit they've brought down to 5 milligrams per liter for well testing. Many of the towns on the Cape have done the same thing. And a final point, concerned that this model, which Brian and other experienced geologists are doubting is accurate, and the numbers might be running much higher with better analysis. The levels, you would not want to be drinking water with 6.95 milligrams per liter of nitrate. That's indicative of you drinking some of your septic effluent. Background levels in Sherborn for nitrates in wells, I've looked at a lot of data for Sherborn, are in the 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 milligrams per liter when there's no influence of septic in a well. My well, I'm getting like 0.3 nitrate. So for a nitrogen loading analysis to show this brand new septic system is going to be introducing 6.95 milligrams a liter at the edge of the property, I don't, I'm blown away. I just, how can you approve that much pollution uh, uh, from the project? So I just wanted to point out those values to you.
Yes, it's difficult, and that's the problem with these very large, dense systems, is that I believe that Title V was written more for small systems and took into account dilution. And that doesn't work so well when you have large systems in one place, and when dispersion is not in all directions, it is typically flowing out, as has been shown on some other documents that have been submitted by people in attendance now. And there are protections at the state level for public water supplies that they shouldn't have over 5 in terms of septic effluent reaching them as a sensitive receptor. So and then there were no regulations written for this in-between zone of these very large systems and what their impact would be, and particularly not on private wells. And it kind of got forgotten, and towns are unprepared for this. And Mark mentioned that he was at a conference earlier today, and when the issue of bedroom count came up, and I forget, Mark, what that was in the context of, but he said hands started shooting up. because
that is correct. Yeah.
It's about abuse of deed recordings around bedroom count, and that's I gather, a relatively new phenomenon and concern. So I think, unfortunately, Sherborn is not alone in these large systems going in for larger projects in ways that we're unprepared for to some degree. So we would like to see these analyses done better. Certainly when I was reviewing what had been done for the fields at Sherborn, because that's the other project in town that was of a similar size. At the time that that was done, there were at least 4 different hydrogeologists who did evaluations of the nitrogen loading that would take place in the area of impact and the levels that would be attained in different parts of that property. So the system size was very similar. The sands, the soil upon which it was being built was much more homogeneous and sandier than here, which would mean that things would move faster and not be treated as well. Or more, it was more about the movement, so, and how the bounding would be affected. I'll take that back, that last statement. But so similar size for the analyses done for this location. They use similar soil type, some similar numbers for some parts, not others, and came out with at a down gradient receptor that was, for this property, for Farm Road, is 150 feet. For the field at Sherborn, it was 600 feet. This was the numbers that Tom just mentioned, in the 3 to 6 range, roughly. And again, that's closer for this property. For the field at Sherborn, it was at in the 20s, the mid 20s, at a distance 4 times as far. So I'm wondering what's in the details of the analysis that the inputs sound very similar, but the results came out significantly different. And without an understanding about what the workings are in that black box of equations, that's going to be hard to figure out. And that's why I hope the peer review, what the peer reviewer did for the field at Sherborn, which is to take the numbers and plug it into a model and run it and see what they get with data from the site and with some evaluation about the appropriateness of the numbers being put into the model. Because there's a disconnect here. And I can't
Can I
see what it.
speak? Can I speak, please?
Yes,
I've been waiting for my turn.
yes.
So I wanted to echo what Tom Trainer said. He just hadn't said it yet. So I appreciate that. And I also wanted to point out that speaking of nitrogen toxicity, if we have these calculations, I think we are smart, independent people who can listen to the science and actually pay attention to it. We do have the ability to make good decisions based on the data. And we already have the experience very recently of another project where scientists in advance warned us that the ledge was containing lead. And if the ledge was disrupted, lead would arrive in the drinking water. And that's exactly what happened within 3 weeks of the ledge disruption. I think that we need to listen to the scientists, look at the data, and make smart decisions. We are a board of health, and we need to think about public health, and we need to make decisions. And sometimes we can't lean on past experience because we are setting, this is what being leaders is. We can't just always follow other people's mistakes. We don't want to be the people who lead to the case reports of what people shouldn't do. We know better. We should know better. We should learn from our mistakes, and we should make good decisions to protect not only the abutters, but the future residents of this project. It's not going to be safe. And the board can make good decisions. We not only have to worry about manganese, we have to worry about lead, we have to worry about nitrogen toxicity. And we also know that down gradient to this project is elderly housing in town. That's the population that's the most vulnerable, or one of the most vulnerable populations. If they have nitrogen toxicity, it's asymptomatic. They might just die because they won't know that they have excess nitrogen in their water. We have to be smart, and we can't just say we can't do anything, because we can, and we need to use the information, listen to the scientists, and make smart, good decisions. We know that we need housing, but we need housing with potable water. We need projects that don't endanger and contaminate abutters and destroy our natural resources and damage the property values and the water for the entire town. We cannot predict where the water is going to go. It's not going to be confined to one person when it's this wet.
Okay. Mark.
Daryl, I put my hand up after Mary, so I don't mind letting Mary go ahead of me if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Daryl. Just a couple points. I had a question for Mark about, first of all, thank you for running through the deficiency stuff. That was super helpful to understand. But I had a question about the area where the septic system's going in. It's a huge, as you know, wooded area, and there'll probably be, I'm guessing 30 or 40 or 50 trees removed to put that in. Is there an impact on the groundwater assumptions when that happens? And you don't have to answer, but I just am wondering if that's something that we should take into consideration.
Well,
and that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was gonna say, that's a good question that I never had posed before, but there will be trees coming down. I don't know how many, but with larger systems of this nature, that's why we don't normally get the questions, because we usually see just single household systems.
Right.
They do require that they do a groundwater mounding analysis based on the fact that it's such a large system. So that is the critical point that needs to be evaluated and correct for this septic system to be sited at the right distance to the projected groundwater mounding. So I think that probably was built into the fact for large systems that possible trees would come down as well. Trees are great. They allow for transevaporation during the summer, spring months, and fall until the leaves fall off. But I don't know of any code that would address trees falling down. But to help with the question is the fact that they need to do groundwater mounding to make sure that's accurate and correct for this large system.
Okay, because I had read somewhere that the removal of 30 trees is the equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool annually. So that's an awful lot of water going
Yeah, no,
somewhere.
I
Yeah.
again, Title V doesn't address it, but I can
Yeah.
see that from the
Yeah.
transevaporation.
Yeah.
You would, but we would hope they put a vegetated cover over it that's made of mostly grass. There's people looking at wild meadows and stuff like that, something that would allow for transevaporation, which was actually discussed today at the conference I went to, that it's very important to have a vegetative matter over a septic system that allows for that transevaporation.
Okay, thanks, Mark. The second question is, you mentioned that there were, and I'm not going to get this right, but something around a Kutris or something, but there's a lot of plastic pipes that are going in, and I wonder if there have been any studies around PFAS
Sure. Now they're called
with that.
Caltech.
Okay,
They're a chamber. They've been around for years. They're using a very large chamber because it's such a large volume of effluent that's coming to the
Yep.
being disposed of at the leaching field. But I don't know on the PFAS, but most of that plastic is HDPE, high density polyethylene. So it is actually doesn't leach out at all.
Okay.
It's ironic they brought up leaching pipes today too at the conference, and how, old leaching pipes made out of HDPE plastic, just they look brand new still. So they
Okay.
don't deteriorate. If it was another type of pipe or concrete, it would deteriorate. But the HDPE plastics they're making, or the high density plastics, don't usually deteriorate, and actually was discussed today as well.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you. Sorry, I have two quick more comments. That Tom Trainer's comment about the potential for, even if it was just 6 milligrams at the property line, even though our expert has said it's 10 or more. Could we ask for a condition that wells be installed at the property line similar to what was done at the fields? I guess that's sort of an open question. And then the last comment is really just to thank you guys. I know this has been a tremendous amount of time and hassle, and you've put a lot of effort into managing this project, and we do appreciate it. So thank you.
So under certain conditions, there is a monitoring plan required for larger systems, but I don't believe this crossed the threshold. I have to double check that.
Yeah, for the actual innovative technology, Daryl, I'm sorry, I overspoke.
Oh, if you know, take it away.
No, they're using innovative alternative technologies as it relates to the septic system treatment plant. It's like a treatment plant where they're using media to reduce the total soluble solids as well as the BOD. So that will require maintenance, and it will have to have an agreement in respect to that use of that technology. And I was going to just lead off when I had my hand raised where Tom was going with nitrate nitrogen. That was reviewed today at our conference too, and they brought up, and I had forgotten about this, that if you have a well that is between a septic system or a cesspool between 50 to 100 feet, they require you test that well for coliform, as well as total coliform, as well as for nitrate nitrogen and ammonia nitrogen. And DEP set the standard at 5 parts per million for the nitrate nitrogen, based on the fact they're a minimum code. So when we see 10 parts per million, that's a minimum. And again, even in Title V, if you're doing a sale of a home and you're doing a Title V inspection, well is between the 50 to 100 feet. you have to make sure that the nitrate nitrogen is 5 parts per million or less. So there's variations to the concerns of nitrates in water, especially well water.
Okay, Tom?
Thank you, Mark. Follow-on question on what you just said. Is that in Title V somewhere? Is that in the code?
Yeah,
Is that
Tom,
language?
if you want,
That
I can
language?
if you got a second, it's
Or
310
if you could,
CMR
yeah,
15.303 B and C. You'll see that in Title V. That's the section that deals with the Title V inspections, and you'll see that level of 5 parts per million or less.
and that was 15303B and C?
310 CMR 15.303 B. B is more for the well to a cesspool, and C is for the well to a septic system that's within 50 to 100 feet. You have to test that well if that's the case, and the state has made it a requirement that it be 5 parts per million or less for that situation. I don't want to confuse it with this, because it is 10 parts per million. That is what we're addressing for this project. But it just goes to show you there are variations, and you know, even the DEP has made a greater requirement to make sure nitrates aren't getting into a well that's very close to a septic.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions before I go back out to others? Or comments?
I've taken all of this in stride, but I did have a quick follow-up question, Mark, when you were talking about the borehole permeability testing in the field. I just trying to have a mental model. Would that be done by Claw or by Tetra Tech?
It should be done by the applicant's engineer. I would suggest that Tetra Tech, again, I can't tell Tetra Tech what to do, but I would suggest they be there for the testing. It may require a specialized engineer to do that type of borehole. But again, it's up to the engineer or Deisheng Wang from CLAR if he's willing or is knowledgeable how to do that. If not, I mean, there are experts out there that can do that type of testing. And I would hope Tetra Tech would also entertain to be there, to see it go, review it. I have a feeling they've seen this done before, but I don't want to speak for Tetra Tech.
Right, and it's not an unusual type of test. It is the kind of test that it's done for this sort of loading, hydraulic loading.
It'd be my first, but it shouldn't be the first for most engineers out there.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, Brian, and then
Farm Road. Yeah, the permeability testing is something that's relatively routine outside of this forum. Again, I'd like to point people to the Horsley letter, which is a attachment A to our letter today to your board and to the ZBA, in which Scott recommends, actually says that the type of testing that was done should not be relied upon for the purposes of determining hydraulic conductivity for an SAS at a site like this. So I'd like to point you to that. And number two, if Mass DEP has already put 5 parts per million or milligrams per liter as a threshold in their regulations, that there is nothing at all which would prevent any municipal board from using that as a conservative threshold to ensure that public health was ensured between a discharge location and a receptor, such as a private well at 53 Farm Road or 55 Farm Road or 49 Farm Road.
If I can, and Brian, thank you for that. I was concerned if I brought it up, it may bring out this type of discussion, but this would be only if your well was within 50 feet of 50 to 100 feet of a existing septic system. That's where that language is noted. But I was just bringing it up to show the importance of nitrates in groundwater. But Title V would address the 10 parts per million in a different location for this type of review. But I was just more or less saying that just to, again, agree with what's been said about the importance of nitrogen in water.
Yeah, I'll go for 0 parts per million.
Understandable.
So I'd like to bring this up because after something I read earlier today, where, as I noted, that PWS's, the target was not to exceed 5 for flow from a groundwater discharge, reaching a sensitive receptor, the PWS. So what does the board think about advocating for a lower target in our recommendations to ZBA?
Oh, I'm for it.
We could note what the statutes have, but we could also recommend a different target. So in addition to more transparent and rigorous evaluations overall, and confirmation that that has been done, to me, is very important as well.
Daryl, I mean, I certainly understand why we would do that. I think, being the devil's advocate, can we say that that has been equivalent on other projects in town? I mean, I know it's one thing if we say what the requirement is versus
Right.
what we would advocate for, I understand. But I want to make sure that we distinguish between those two in
Yes.
our notes to ZBA, and then I just want to kind of do a gut check of, does that seem consistent? Because I think that's kind of the threshold we're held to, right?
Right. It's not consistent, but I had not previously come across that difference of a PWS versus a private well. And I'm not sure why, even at the state level. I mean, they have jurisdiction over PWSs, so that might be why it was limited to PWSs, because that's under their jurisdiction, versus putting that kind of limit on for places with private wells. It's about the only rationale I could think of for that, more of an administrative kind of thing. So I think we'd have to hold it. Right now, it'd be nice to confirm what it will be. And I'm finding it hard to believe that the levels are as low as they predict.
And just to kind of step back for a second for big picture, from Tetra Tech, we are functionally looking for a validation of the various analyses, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so and I think that that's reasonable, and that certainly has happened in other projects. And so I cannot imagine approving any project without that input. I'm done.
Okay. Diana, did you have more?
Other than, yeah, I do find that curious, Daryl, that the different levels here, we're looking at what the 5, and it's like, why is there a different standard?
But I'll say, though, when I've worked on groundwater discharge permits for, well, they're commercial industrial properties, but the evaluations only had to consider as receptors for those permits public water supplies in the area and not the private water supplies that were closest to the discharge, which was essentially like a septic field, had gone through treatment in a treatment plant beforehand, but it was discharged to the ground in a similar manner. And I found that peculiar. So for my client, we looked at the private water supplies anyway, because they wanted to ensure that they weren't going to have some liability in the future for something, but that was not driven by the regulation. That was driven by them being willing to be precautionary. So there is that distinction elsewhere between PWS measures or measures around PWS is being taken and not being applied to private water supplies. So,
Yeah, can I make a comment?
sure.
So to refer to the whether or not this is consistent, I think it's a little bit out of context because this is a big project. It's a 40B, and it's not the typical projects that we're looking at in town. We have multiple homes and multiple people who are sharing. They have shared aquifers, shared water supplies, and the risks are significantly higher, and the regulations don't address some of the issues. So I don't think we need to worry about that because we have to consider these issues as a Board of Health for the townspeople and the future residents of this project. So I don't think that the consistency part really is relevant here because we have a responsibility to weigh this project. It's going to be private water supplies, so it's irrelevant what happens with public water supply, and it's our jurisdiction. So that's my comment there. And I do think that we need validation about the serious concerns and the validity and consistency of the data that have been raised by some very knowledgeable and experienced individuals in town and experts who've been hired who have no conflicts of interest.
Okay. So just on the if this was to go to the court for housing, consistency is important to them on how we're evaluating this. So that is important. We have had project of equivalent size to this, the fields. And
No. I'm saying the
well.
opposite. I'm saying that we need the information to be consistent and we need to pay attention to the identification
I heard that too. That was a separate consistency point that you made. That was separate, and I heard that one. What would be helpful is if you have anything to add of a technical, specific nature that will, rather than just the generalized terms of protect the water, because that's what the Board of Health largely exists for, Sherborn. And if you have anything to add to the comment letter that we've already submitted, along those lines of those comments, that would be very helpful. But we can't really pass on the general stuff to the peer reviewer and to ZBA. It won't be useful. We do need specifics. So, all right. So, Mary, and then we should, I don't know, we have, at some point, like to, authorize a team to write up a lot of these things and have that ready for Monday and get it out to the board to be able to review before they see it on Monday, but we'll need to take a vote on that. So that's coming. And then
I'll put my hand down as soon as I make this last comment. I'll never put it up again in this meeting.
So, all right, so let's do that. We need to talk about if there's anything else major. I mean, it's major. These are major topics and unanswered questions and remaining Title V compliance needs for the septic system. But, we need to see if there's anything else, and then we have to talk about wells. So, but Mary, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just one final comment for your consideration. So there are two other homes on this parcel map that we're looking at right now. One is 55 and one is 53, which has recently been built. And there are two additional wells there. And if you look at the existing house, which was 55, the well is directly behind a little deck there in the back.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's, it's pretty close to where all the effluent is going out. So I don't, I don't know where that gets measured, but I'm not only concerned for me, but I'm concerned for all the people moving in. I'm concerned for the people who are going to be, living in and renting or, buying these other homes. And I just think that, it's just, it feels very outsized, and the wells are in proximity, in that 55 Farm Road home. They feel pretty close to that system. So
Right.
consider, and it's currently, being used as a rental. But all of this is under control of a single entity, or multiple LLCs, but a single person. So I think it's important to remember that, we've talked about this as a phased project, and it feels like it is becoming a phased project. Thanks, Daryl.
Yeah, so that's part of the importance of having confirmation of groundwater flow direction, which is not yet clear in the report. Okay. So Mark, I'll ask you this. I see one that there's, based on the contour lines here, that there's going to be a lot of reworking of the terrain.
Yes,
Assuming to make the infiltration basin for stormwater.
that's correct. Yep.
And this should be part of the stormwater analysis as to how this might be affecting that. And I don't know, I haven't seen much on that.
Nor have I. That's,
Or explains why they think it would not have impact. They talk about 4 infiltration basins being distributed. So here's one, here's one. I'm not sure where the others are offhand.
I think there's one up to the far near where the wells are going. I think up in that area. I think there's one there. I got the larger plan. If you want, I can open it up and take a peek.
Oh, you mean online or on your desk there?
Right on my desk here. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, if you could point me to where it might be.
Yeah, so you have the one you pointed out right near the soil absorption system.
Yeah.
You have one down to right near unit number 1.
Yep.
And then well, I don't know. No, they're not using a pond. I thought there was one up near the well group, but maybe I'm mistaken. Let me see if I can.
Oh, is this one? These, these.
Yeah, you're right at the other one. That's correct, Daryl. That's on the other side of the driveway there. Yep.
At first, I was assuming that was just contours of the field, but
And
now
then they
they're
have
looking.
the fire tanks just above that. That's for the fire department. And then there's another one above that. So you have the fire tank, and then just above that, you have the other basin, just above the fire tank. So it's on that side, but not near the wells. I was mistaken saying that.
Okay. The other thing is the checking of the piping layouts, because there are required distances between water lines and septic lines for good reasons. Do we need to ask Shang to produce, just selected layers instead of putting everything on a plan, which then obscures the details of other things that you're looking for? Would that
I
be
agree.
helpful? Or?
Very, very helpful. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, too, the profiles would be very helpful too. The groundwater profile, the
Mhm.
final cover profile over the septic system itself, but then the water lines, they're just drawing blue lines on the plan, but we're dealing with a subdivision here, not someone's personal house where there's just one line. So how deep are they going to be? Are they below the frost line? Because if we don't review it, I don't know if anyone else will be reviewing it. So I think that's important to request a profile of the water lines as well, to know the total cover over those water lines. Are there any shut-off valves? Because it's really designing a water treatment facility of, like putting in water lines in streets. So
Mhm.
I think that would be very important to have that information.
Right,
Which
and I also,
go ahead, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I am concerned we've got lots of different wells that need to reach different clusters of homes, and then homes that need to all reach the septic. It just seems like it potentially leads to more crisscrossing of lines in a way that's not so predictable, rather than all the lines running down the street. I don't know.
I agree with you, Daryl. The septic lines are shown in red, and water lines are shown in blue, and but again, there could be the chance that I'm looking at the plan right now. We are crossing in the center of the street, up near unit number between 26 and 27. There's a crossover. There's more crossovers as well, especially on that side of the street. You have at unit 28 right in front of that house where the street opens up. There's a crossover of the water lines there as well. So we need more details to make sure the profile shows the water line over the sewer line. So that in case the sewer line was over the water line, you don't want that leaking into the water line. So
Yeah, so another level of detail, 3D layout.
yes,
I'm sorry, maybe you can't hear me. My computer's really having a tough time. Okay. All right. Well, on to wells, which are also difficult. So right now, let's see, I can forget which way the numbers run. Okay. Here's well 1. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Was there an 8? No, I think it was 7. Oops. Do you remember if there was an 8th well, Mark?
It's 7.
I'm
Okay.
looking right now, Daryl. Let's see, 1, 2,
Yeah, I thought it was 7.
5.
Yeah, here's 6. It's right there, and 7. So I don't know. As I was blowing this up before, everything becomes blurrier, so measurements become tougher.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like a better sense of what the setbacks are from other features, and all of these close-in ones, the 3, 1, 6, and 7 need some kind of protection, I think, from traffic. I mean, this one a little less, so maybe that's only a pedestrian way.
Yeah. And I agree, Daryl. If you look at well group number 5, which is right at the end of that dead end street, right there, you were right on it.
Yeah, here.
Is snow going to be plowed into that one? It's just in a bad location in my view. I know there's a
Oh,
little dead, I know there's a
yeah.
little dirt road coming off it, but snow removal, they may just plow all that snow right into that well. It's just a bad location in my view.
Okay.
I don't know how much weight and leverage we'll have when it comes to the well locations and if they need to follow our requirements, but if that's the case, that would be an issue having that well located right at the end of that traveled way.
So I'll jump around a little bit. I would like to see make sure that the ZBA knows that the wells need to go in first, which
Yes.
is basically what happens with other properties, because having a water supply is the first step to having a habitable property.
Yes.
So
Now, I'm
they
wondering if they're gonna phase
that-
it, if they, sorry, Daryl, I get, if they phase it, they may put in well number 6 first, the one at the edge of the road, and just do those units first, and it'll get kind of very, I don't know if they're building this all at once, so they're building it in phases. If they're building it in phases, I don't know if I can, not me personally, but I don't know if the regulations require them to drill another, the wells for all the properties and if they're phasing it. But that's something we don't know and we should ask them. Are you planning to phase this project?
I'd say offhand, I wouldn't want the wells to be phased because all right, so let's say they phased it. They put in a well, they tested for quantity initially and did pump tests. But given the proximity of these wells, I really do think that there should be simultaneous pump testing. So I'd hate for them to do it one by one
I agree.
and test along the way and then get to the end and even if they did the simultaneous pump test eventually, that might be too late for understanding what your available water is for the project. And you might have ruled out other possible locations if the building is going on, right?
Yeah.
If the well and then the associated units.
I agree.
Seems a risky measure. And or maybe we'd have to make it clear that they would be taking that on under their own risk. And maybe as each well was added, if they want to stepwise, be much more costly to do it that way. But first you test the first well, then when you put in the second, you test the first and the second together. Then when you add the third, you do 1, 2, and 3, and so on. Some redundancy, a slow reveal of what the issue is. And we wouldn't want to have any compromises if, like, say that the whole project had to go ahead. We'd have to link together the water supply with the ability to move on to the next phase. Does that make sense to have some specifications about that if they didn't put the wells in all at once?
I believe so, if I may just point that out, especially since they're all about 100 feet between each other. That's not a great distance. I know we say 75 feet between wells, but these wells are not for a single home. They're producing water for several homes. So I really believe they should be treated like they treated the wells at Abbey Road. And that is, they did pump downs for 2 days to make sure one well wasn't drawing down from another well. We may want to use that example of that process that was used down at Abbey Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if any other properties in this area have had issues with water supply over time.
Well, Daryl, if you remember the 2 wells over at 59 North Main, I don't know if the other board members were on the board at that time, but they did drawdowns. They had both wells running to make and requested if any neighbor wanted their well checked while they were drawing those wells down to see if it had any effect on the abutters. And there were 2 or 3 abutters that were requesting to have their well checked at the same time the drawdown was going on at 59 North Main Street for their 2 wells.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it really, I think it's important that that the wells be drilled together and they draw them down at the same time. But again, I don't know if we can force that on the applicant.
Well, we can't anyway. We can only recommend all of this.
But it does sound
Okay.
like there's precedence for that.
Mhm.
So Mark, just so I understand how that worked, immediate abutters were notified and given the opportunity to have like a transducer or something like that in their well, or how did
Yes,
that process?
exactly how it happened. And they put those transducers on, I think, 3 of the homes that were around 59 North Main Street. And then they started drawing down the 2 wells at 59 North Main. And thankfully, there wasn't any major drawdown on the butters who requested to have their well as part of the study. They had to agree to be part of the study. I'm trying to think on the fields. I don't know. Those public wells, so they didn't do that there. But
Oh,
I do.
they may have done
Abbey
it.
Road. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Daryl.
the DEP usually requires monitoring for new PWS is going in.
I know at Abbey Road, they were concerned about the 3 wells they drilled there for their own purposes to make sure that one, they get enough water through those 3 wells. But I don't believe they were required to knock on doors of abutters to see if they wanted to see if their well was being affected. I think we started doing that at 59 North Main Street.
I also think that I thought there were multiple wells at Abbey Road to begin with.
That's correct, Darrell. There were 3
Yeah.
wells, I believe, right down on the lower side near the tracks. And
Yeah, they already had the wells.
yeah, well, they drilled 3 new
2 were
ones.
better than the third, something like that.
Yeah,
And
I
they
think they
added.
drilled, yeah, they drilled 2 or 3 wells at the lower end. They had a well up at the library. Well, it used to be the library. And I think they had a well for the house as well. But it's been a while, but I know there was a gentleman from the well company who stayed overnight because they brought a trailer in for him so he could stay over for 1 night or 2 nights. And I remember going down and checking it while he was doing the drawdowns. So I think, but again, I wasn't on the Abbey Road project for the entirety of that project, but I believe they drilled 2 or 3 wells down on the low side near the tracks, and then they were comparing. They were just making sure they had enough water. Actually, by running all 3 wells, they would know how much each well would produce while they all run together, because their concern was quantity, and they wanted to make sure they had enough quantity with all 3 wells running.
Yeah.
2 wells.
Okay.
So
All
that
right.
sounds like a recommendation then. I mean, I agree. I think that we should have them simultaneously run, pump tested. And then of course, abutters can choose or not choose, but I like that idea of suggesting that that option is made available to them. To the abutters to have their a transducer at the same time. That is very helpful to know, Mark.
We can pull the information from both Abbey Road and 59 North Main to pull exactly. It'd be in the minutes as well, So Ellen, if you're listening, maybe one of your projects, maybe one of your last ones. I'm sorry, but maybe we can pull the minutes to see the actual processes we use for both properties.
Yeah, it's Nobis has also provided a guide in the past that was going to be used for some other projects in town for the Hunting Lane 41 North Main Street project. So we have guidance for that, and we talked about it too, not too long ago with the Laurel Fields wells going in. So I gather they did not get to the pump test yet, but they acknowledged that, yes, one could go around and monitor nearby wells when doing that.
Yeah, they weren't getting enough water at Laurel Fields, so I don't believe they went any further. They found that they were getting a low volume during the
Right.
pump testing, so they just didn't bother going further at this point. I'm not saying they won't go further down the road, but
Well, they were going to frack and then try again, but haven't heard. And it's not particularly expensive. I think it was something like $100 a week to get the transducer for the wells. So that's not a high hurdle. And it's easier than having somebody periodically go and monitor. So it's a nice, easy way to get the data. Okay. Let's see what other issues. Well, so have you been able to check yet all of the setback requirements and things like that if these are not PWSs and are going by our regulations?
I have not actually, I know the wells are 100 feet apart.
Okay.
I can tell just from looking with that. That's just so you know, the scale on the plan you're looking at is 1 in 50 feet. 1 inch equals 50 feet. So I believe they have the 25 feet to the property lines. The one that worries me the most is the one that's at the edge of that traveled way.
Yeah, number 6.
We've 6.
Right, that one. And this one concerns me a bit, but again, I don't think that's vehicular traffic. It's
No,
more
it's
like
not,
it's
but
going
you
to
do
front
have
doors. I think.
you have wetlands down below it though. Not
Mm.
maybe 50 feet down, but you know, there are wetlands lower towards the street, towards Farm Road.
Okay, and actually, the one up here, yeah, maybe that's far enough. But whether that would need some protection too.
I agree. That one's very close to the road.
Is number 7 well, in the area that has previously or recently had flooding? Am I orienting myself correctly here?
Let's see, number
Yeah.
7.
That's down by the
Uh,
wetlands near the road.
Yeah, that's the one
Pond.
that's near wetlands, and
Yeah.
there's a pond down below it, and then the wetland line goes up, so there's no knowing if water could reach up that far, you know, I'm not for sure. But it is closest to the wetlands. It's, let me see, at the 50 scale.
It's right at the 50-foot null alteration zone.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But what I was clarifying is that the area that has been recently flooded?
I don't know. I don't know, Daryl. Are you aware if that area is flooded?
It's gotten close. I don't know if it's reached quite that far.
Okay.
We
I'm
do
just-
have some other maps that have to kind of put them side by side. But, you know, it was more extensive, but I think the surprise this past year was towards this road. That I think is going to be very close, if not over where this is. And, but I'm going off of memory. So, and then it also spread this way a lot. There was quite a bit of water, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying for all the areas that are off of the map. I'm trying to make sense of those in real space. So thank you.
Yeah.
Just,
And just so you know, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. I suspect Brian or Mary may be able to tell us. They might be able to associate these plans in real life.
And
So
well,
the,
go ahead, Brian.
sorry.
go
Our
ahead.
the drone footage that was shot that was submitted to ZBA shows the flooding at about 216.7 feet above MSL, which can be, you know, drawn on Deshang's plans. But after that drone footage was shot, the water went up even more. Our current guess is that it hit about 217 MSL. And that's a line on the map that you can just follow because they were kind enough to put topography on their maps. You can just take the 217 MSL interval and put a highlighter on it and trace out where the extent of flooding was as of about 2.5 weeks ago. So I hope that helps in your deliberations.
Yep,
So
that does.
That looks like the 217 is right at that well. Am I seeing that correct? Daryl, do you see that too? I have mine as zoomed in as it can get,
Um,
and that's what it looks like.
as you can s- It takes for mine to adjust, so.
Yeah,
Sure.
it is
Or-
217 that's going across. They are gonna build the elevation up a little bit near it, up to 222 and 221, but right
Ah.
now the actual elevation is 217 at that
Oh,
location.
well, yeah, it is.
Well number
Okay.
3, well number 7, I'm sorry.
Hmm.
I was gonna say, just so you know, the well off the main road, well number 5 is 20 feet off the road, and well number 1 is 18 feet off the road. So, as shown in the scale of 1 in 50.
Okay.
So they're close. They're close to the roads.
What did you say
Mhm.
5 was, Mark? I'm sorry.
So well number 1 is 18 feet off the road,
Okay. Yep.
and the other one that concerns me even more is well number 6, because it's right at the end of the road before you get the access road to the wells, and that's 20 feet off the road. I mean, snow removal can push snow deeper than, and especially if they're trying to keep the access road open for the wells, they may push all the snow right towards that well. It's very concerning. Both wells are very concerning that they could have potential damage if not protected because they're so
Mhm.
close to the road.
Yeah.
In terms of testing of the wells, does anyone see any reason to not require the test that we require for new wells?
And we require PFAS now too, and I would request that the board have them, just so I didn't mean to jump the board on this one, but I was just gonna say that we should follow the same process that we follow for a new well for a house, is that they test at the well, it has to meet our requirements, and then they test at each tap. I think that gives assurance to the new owners of these properties that, the water that was transferred all the way through the piping made it to their faucet in the same manner and tested in the same manner as it was at the well. Because especially with this being a big project, it could be they drill the wells in 2025, say, and then in 28, 3 years later, they may be still hooking up to various units. So I'd suggest we follow our regulations completely as they're written.
But for the
Just-
quality I'm sorry, go ahead, Daryl.
No, go.
I was gonna say, what we ran into on the previous project at Greenwood was we had to apply the regulations at that were kind of live at time of project eligibility, which was prior to our new testing of PFAS at the time of a new well. So I don't think that we can, unfortunately, test for that, require
I
that.
think we can recommend it because it would be odd not to, given how prominent that issue is right now. Okay, Brian?
Sorry,
Sorry.
Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road again. This is the location where unfortunately there was a tremendous fire that occurred. I can't recall how long ago it was, but if Sherborn Fire Department had AFFF on their trucks, which they probably did because of the railroad crossings that come through town, it's entirely possible they deployed it trying to put out the barn fire that killed all those horses those years ago here. It was a really bad fire. It's in the record. So if you're looking for evidence for possible use of AFFF, that would be it.
We've asked the Sherborn Fire Department on numerous occasions about use of PFAS-containing firefighting foams, and they don't believe it ever has been used. Now, we've asked it several times because we've had several changes in fire chiefs during the time period that we were asking, and they've all given the same answer, that they did not use it, which they were pretty happy about in terms of exposure of the firefighters to that material. we don't know for sure. We don't know 100% that that's the case, but that's according to records and talking to folks. Tom?
Thank you. If I could just add a couple comments on that in terms of potential PFAS, AFFF use in Sherborn. Sherborn Fire Department, luckily, really depends on mutual aid and has for many years. And as many of you know, what that translates to is, thankfully, due to our small staffing, we get trucks from a variety of towns in the area. And that's been going on for many years. So you're going to have to interview every fire chief for 20 miles surrounding
Point.
here to,
Point.
answer that question that was just raised. And one unfortunate other fact is, in terms of PFAS well data that I've been able to accumulate from the town's records, the fire department #1 well has about the highest level I've found in their drinking water well. It's about 60 or 70 parts per trillion mass PFAS 6. So it's higher than any well I've seen in Sherborn. So I believe whatever the fire chiefs have told you, but I would be concerned.
No, that's the point about, right, who else is coming to town to fight fires would be useful to know. And then what is the source currently? The firefighting, the jackets, pants, that sort of thing. Are they washing them on site? Who knows? All right, so great. Another contamination thing to investigate and understand. Okay, so would everyone be comfortable with requiring our current testing regime and recommending that PFAS also be added to that? Again, it's just a recommendation for ZBA, and it's a recommendation. It's appropriate practice, but
I think as long as we justify it enough, I think we should recommend it. I agree. They can take it or leave it.
Okay. And any issues with the consistency where we require both a test at the wellhead, so the raw water, and then we require tests at taps in each house. So I think that makes sense, because actually I think it was at 59 North Main where the raw water was fine. House 1, house 2, house 3, house 4, fine. And then one house just wasn't testing well. And they eventually found out that there was a problem with one of the pipes. So that's, as Mark said, it's the perfect way to learn if there is a problem somewhere with the installation. Maybe there wasn't a good seal on a coupling on the pipes. Was it soldered well? Who knows? And things were getting in. In that case, it was bacteria. Okay.
Is there anything along the lines, so we've checked off quantity and quality discussion for the construction, and I turn to Mark for this too, if he has any input, if we would just recommend also the construction of wells be consistent with our regs, follow our regulations.
I agree. They should follow our regulations, because there's no saying they couldn't put in shallow wells, so overburden wells. And I know we were dealing with that with Whitney Farms years ago, and they finally decided to go with deep wells, deep artesian wells. So I think they should follow all our regulations, and our well requirements should be followed completely, in my view.
Mhm.
When I say our wells, I mean the Sherborn Board of Health regulations.
Mhm. And including setbacks. Is that, so Daryl, in the case of Greenwood, when we were again recommending with private wells, the board voted. Do you think that's something we should do here, or do you think our discussion suffices for now?
Uh,
Not to put you on the spot.
right, I guess my first thought was we would have the luxury of writing everything up before the hearing, but that may not happen, so. So should we vote now?
If I can just add, I think the argument on green,
Well, a little, at least the septic I'm really
Uh,
wrestling with.
Talking about in the
Yeah.
event that's private wells,
No.
the recommendations that our regulations be followed for construction, quality and quantity in full.
Yes, I don't see the same constraints. It seems even some of the setback adjustments that Mark was mentioning
Mhm.
should be doable. There's space.
I agree with that. That I was just going to say, this won't stop the project by them following all of the Sherborn Board of Health well regulations. Where Greenwood Homes, they didn't have the space to place the wells at the distances that we require. But in this case, I don't see where that should be an issue for this project.
Mhm. Okay, so do we have a motion to recommend to the ZBA that all of Sherborne's private well regulations be followed for this project?
So
If,
moved. Yeah.
if they go the private water supply well route,
Oh, versus the public, huh?
yes.
Well, that would be the best option for the future residents. If they, yeah, I mean, it'd be better if it was public, but
Right, we can't, it's difficult for us to force that to be. So, and that's why I want in our motion the caveat of if they go the private well route, because that is yet to be determined. And then the next thing I'd ask is, do we want to recommend that it go the public water supply route? So they fit together.
So should we reverse the order, Daryl? I know that you called for a motion. Should we first start?
Sure.
Down. Should we first discuss what our primary recommendation is, which is the public water supply? And I think that you've elaborated the reasoning behind that pretty thoroughly. If we need to review it here, we can, but I think that's been pretty well discussed and documented. And I think then the secondary is, in the event of private wells, we would recommend that our regulations be followed in full.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, I like that. Okay.
I do
So-
too. Thank you, Julie.
Yes, all right, then do we have a motion to recommend? How do we want to elaborate? Do we just want to say that we recommend a public water supply for this project, or do we want to embellish that at all?
Do we get to make that decision, or does that determination take place at the state level or at the
determination-
housing office?
Oh, okay, the determination that as they presented their well plan to Mass DEP, and there are ways to have a project like this, have wells and go the private route. And they met the requirements for that, where they are keeping the lines separate and that a serpentine road here leading from well to well is providing access to the wells What's not on here is whether they have the land ownership requirements, but maybe that needs to be verified with Mass DP. Is what we're seeing, what they saw. When the state made a determination like that for the other projects in town, the land between the house that's served and the well, there had to be a link for those homeowners to be able to send in repair trucks and that sort of thing if they needed to take care of their well. So I'm not seeing those kind of property lines here, or if this is a different overall ownership for this whole project, if it's handled differently. So they all kind of own all of the wells. I don't know. Maybe that's, dear, another question.
Can we as a board request that?
So we don't make the determination of whether it's a PWS on paper. DEP already did that, and they said it could be, but you've set it up so it doesn't have to be. And then we make a recommendation to ZBA about what path we suggest in the interest of public health. And then they do their comprehensive permit, and depending on what they include, that may be challenged and that may go to housing court.
But we could recommend to ZBA that we think it should be reevaluated and potentially be considered a public water supply or approached as a public water supply.
We've already been doing that in the meetings, so yes, this would just
Right,
be
but this is our final recommendation, which is why I'm.
Yes. Yes.
Daryl, Tom Trainer has his hand up.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I apologize because you're deliberating, but if I could just add a key point, and it's in the record with the ZBA, the Mass DEP approval of what you've been just talking about, the potential of having these as public water supplies was conditional. So they don't have any final, the developer has no final approval
Right.
on Mass DEP public water supplies, or the need not to install public water supplies. It's a conditional approval to go private.
Yeah, it's not even so much an approval to be private as it is a determination, even if conditional, that it did not meet the requirements for a PWS.
And if I could just add, at some point, the developer has to come back with more information to get that final approval. Is the way I read the DEP letter. But it's in the.
Reread. There were two letters. One that came out listing the need for more information, and a second one that came out and said we have determined that it's not a PWS.
That final letter was conditional.
Yeah, but not too much at the time. But yes, yeah, okay. So
I don't want to belabor it. You can look it up. Thanks.
But one thing I'll just note to the board when I was looking at the well breakdowns. So wells 2, 5, and 7 currently have 12 bedrooms on each of them, 24 people. So in the event that an additional bedroom was, created, then they would be out of compliance, and they would be requirements for a PWS. Another reason why we want to make sure those unfinished spaces don't become finished into bedrooms.
Or if they do that, we know about it, because then they would have to be a PWS, which might come as a real surprise to the homeowners.
So Daryl, it almost sounds like we have two separate motions here. I almost wonder if we need to just make a motion that we recommend the PWS and then add in any language to support that if you want. And then the second motion is in the event they're determined to be private, all of our local regulations are followed.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion for the PWS?
Daryl, you're the
you-
one who has done the labor intensive work of explaining and reasoning why PWS is there. Do you feel it needs to be a more bulky
Not
in-depth?
really, actually,
Yeah.
'cause so we can simplify it if we need to revisit it. So we have to make the recommendation to the CEA that this project would be best served by a public water supply system.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. See,
And so then I think the second motion would be in the event the water supply was determined to be private, that all of our local regulations be followed.
I would just change our to Sherborn Board of
Thank you.
Health
Yep, sorry.
regulations. So with that amendment,
I'd suggest,
was it seconded?
Hang on, Mark has a suggestion, Daryl.
Okay,
sorry, I'd suggest you use the word shall be followed.
Thank you.
It's
Shall.
stronger, it's a stronger word.
mhm. Okay, Ellen, if you didn't get that, let us know. Otherwise, we'll assume you got that. And was that motion?
I got it.
Okay. All second. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. And now, do we have a motion that in addition to the Sherborn Board of Health regulations for wells, that we recommend PFAS testing in addition to the routine testing already required?
At the time of well establishment.
Yes.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Okay. Do we have a motion to recommend that bedrock disruption regulations be adhered to should the need for bedrock disruption occur in the course of the project?
Will you repeat your question? Sorry.
Talking about whether to recommend that they follow bedrock disruption requirements of the Board of Health. If applicable.
So moved. I would like that to be aware. 'Cause I think, wasn't this the project that he said that if he had to disrupt bedrock, that then there would be no basement?
That was my recollection.
I remembered it for Coolidge Street. I couldn't remember for this one.
Okay, okay, so I may be
He might-
confusing.
Confusing.
So where are, okay.
Daryl, I'm conflicted on that one.
Yeah, I was guessing. So
Why would you not want the ledge disruption regs to be followed?
I am concerned that it will be challenged in court and thrown away.
Or are we just doing a is it just a recommendation?
Hmm.
But it's part of our regulations. So how could it be challenged in court? And we have evidence of drinking water contamination with ledge disruption within the last 6 months in town.
All right, Rebecca, we don't have any on that, any reliable data. Unless you know of stuff that's come through that's been done by a certified lab.
They gave us repeat values from a certified lab.
No, I have not seen that.
Neither have I. I would love to see it, but I have not seen it.
Okay, let's table this one. We don't have a second. And all right, now the tough. Oh dear. Dear, oh dear. All right, so this goes back to the question of the many questions about issues surrounding the septic system. Yeah.
I mean, Daryl, I think until the deficiencies have been resolved, I do not see how we can approve this system.
Right.
And part of that would have to be the validation from the peer reviewer. For me.
Yes, I agree. So what I'm trying to think of is, are there stepwise things that we could do or not? And I'm also trying to figure out, can we do that now when it's so complex? Or again, do we authorize less than a quorum of us to prepare something that tries to organize all the issues that came up this evening and maybe group them? And it could come out to be something that we cannot approve this system for Title V compliance alone because it has not yet met the requirements for Title V. All right, so that would be one. And then another option would be information comes in the next day or two. Maybe if Mark and board members have time to look at it, we could review it. It's going to be a challenge. These are not simple topics. And we could start, even if we still had uncertainty, we could move towards like what is okay and what still remains as problematic and therefore would have to be conditional to receipt of a study with certain qualities and information that it provides, and then it would be okay, kind of thing. Because I'm just concerned that the hearing closes on Monday and we need to have something to guide ZEA with the best that we can do with the information available. And our number one recommendations might be it's not ready yet. And then kind of rank them. This is, if we have to say, sorry, there is no answer to this right now. It's not approvable. It hasn't met requirements in terms of, I know that it's different under 40B, but still it hasn't met the normal kind of requirements that go along with information to be provided as part of a septic application. And that just feels like it's going to be hard to do just talking about it. I feel like I have to go back over everything that we've talked about and try and organize it into something manageable.
Daryl, can I make a suggestion or,
Thoughts?
sorry, may I say something?
Well, let me just hear from, if anyone on the board has something to say, I'd rather that they had a chance first, and then I'll get to you next. And maybe everyone's still thinking, so.
Still thinking, but so Dario, you're looking at the first thing being that there's still deficiencies. And the second is
Yes.
that we're missing information and we really need the method validated. That whole nitrate issue is concerning.
Mhm. Yes. Okay, so while everyone's thinking, Mary?
Thanks, Daryl. Sorry. I think you guys have done a lot already, and I think you've presented some really good information to the ZBA, but you can't be expected to continue to sort of speculate on information you don't have. So I personally think, you know, to Julie's point, like, you have the information that you have today. You're not able to make a decision. You've said that pretty clearly in a number of ways, and that's kind of where you are. And I don't think that the ZBA or the process will necessarily kind of look poorly on this, you know, if you only say we only have what we have and we can't approve this right now. So I don't think you should have to do any more work on this. I mean, you haven't been given the information that you need to make a decision, so you can't make a decision. That's my opinion. And I think a lot of people have looked at the information, and you've done a lot to kind of provide information up to this point, but you can't be expected to do more than the data allows you to do at this point.
It's a mixed bag, and we've communicated with town council on this and others. It could be that the hearing doesn't get extended, and it would be a shame to leave the ZBA with a vacuum of information from us.
Well,
And maybe
I'm sorry you're
if
in that situation then, because that's an unfortunate spot to put a volunteer board in. And I appreciate your work up to this point, because I just don't know how you can speculate on something where you don't have all the information.
right. And most often when this situation happens, there is an extension. But that's not a guarantee. So I'm just trying to hedge against the worst and make sure that we express what we do know and think in a reasonable way that isn't
Right.
that,
Well,
that
thank you
hasn't
for the work
affected-
on this. I know it's been very, like, hours, you know, a lot of hours that you guys have spent on this. So thank you.
So Daryl, we're basically saying we cannot make a determination. The question is, what do we do with that? And I guess just tell me if I'm understanding what you're thinking correctly.
Yeah.
And what the other board members are thinking correct. Tell me if I'm following you here. And so with that lack of information and inability to make a determination, does that necessitate a denial because it's incomplete? Or do we just leave it as cannot make a determination, right? And you're concerned that we need to give ZBA a little more direction than just no determination.
I think if we said we can't approve it, I'd want to say why we can't approve it or why we would deny it in its current state. Again, if it gets to the point where it's going straight to ZBA and we're out of the loop as of late night on Monday, then we need to do sort of a brain dump to them so that they can pick up if they have to keep moving forward. It's a weird, it's odd. It's definitely odd, but Mary,
What about
do you
saying
have?
exactly that and just say we don't have the information that allows us to support the project at this time, and we need more information to be able to make a sound decision? And if you don't think that that can support the project, perhaps it needs to be denied. because it can't be, doesn't have enough information at the moment to support it in this manner or something. I don't know.
And that might be what we say, but I still think we need to provide more details. We can't just do the high level, what you just said. We need to give the details on why. What specifically didn't we have that we needed? Why was it problematic? Why did it kind of look like it was needed, but it didn't meet our needs for what we anticipated? Typically see that kind of thing. We can't just do the other, I don't think. But let me get to Marion, because maybe in her other experiences. Marion, would you like to comment? If you're speaking, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I have to repeat or second what Mary Moore said. You guys have worked way above and beyond the call of duty on this, and I really admire how thorough you've been. I was going to say basically what's just been said, so I won't repeat it, but you cannot approve it as the plans stand because you don't have sufficient information, because the applicant hasn't provided the information that you need to make a decision one way or the other. But I think you can, as you just said, Daryl, list the things, the important things you don't have. Just, not a whole essay on each one, but a list of information you don't have, and then why it's important.
Mhm. Yes.
Give the ZBA a list. I mean, I'm just repeating what other people have said better, actually. So I'll put my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I was going to add to Marion, this is all ammunition for asking for an extension. So you could explain it to Rick that way also. This is part of the reason why an extension is required also.
Yes, good point.
Not that you just can't make a decision, but it affects the timing of everyone making a decision probably.
Oops, is everybody still there?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm just thinking. Frankly, I was wondering, the developer has usually been very attentive to coming to meetings at which one of his projects is discussed. So I'm not sure why they're not here this evening.
It sounds like you guys have your marching orders, though. You still have a bunch of work to do to put this interim report together. So,
Yes.
More power to you. You're doing a great job.
All right, so then let's move on to the next phase. So I have many, many, many pages of drafts of sections of letter. I am maybe not delighted, but I am certainly willing to incorporate some of the things that we've talked about here tonight into that and try to come up with as streamlined a presentation as I can manage. And I don't know if there's anyone else who'd be willing to participate in that.
Daryl, I'm willing to support you, recognizing you are the keeper of most of the technical information, but I'm happy to support you in that.
Okay.
And Daryl,
And
if I
then-
could be of any help, hey, count me in.
So the thing is, between now and our next meeting, we can't have a quorum having a conversation. So it makes
I
it really
defer to
hard.
Julie
Yeah.
then. We can't have a quorum, that's true.
But where you can weigh in is, so if we can come up with something and get it sent out to the board, and if everyone here can review that before we get to ZBA, that would be great. So that you're ready for any things that didn't agree with in there, or did agree with, or additional items or something that would be helpful. And then at that meeting, we could vote. And then if, going back to the other issue, if information rolls in between now and then, and there's the opportunity to review it and digest it and incorporate it, then we'll talk about, having that additional meeting where we could dive into some details before going into the ZBA meeting. But I think that's, yeah. Okay, I think that's about all I can say on that at the moment, except do we have a motion that Julie and I prepare a document of our deliberations to date for the ZBA meeting
So
on behalf?
moved.
Okay. Second, anyone? Maybe Rebecca, you seconding would be good, since you're, Julie and I seconding, who knows?
Will you restate what I'm seconding in a form again?
Oh, all right.
I second giving you guys permission to write this on our behalf. Is that what you're asking me to second?
Yes, to capture what we've been talking about this evening.
In the hopes of just having it done in time to distribute to the board for review prior to the ZBA hearing on Monday.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I don't have a statement to second, but I agree with the concept. Why don't you give me a statement to second?
We already had one. That was then an explanation of it. It's been moved.
No, I heard you talking about it, but nobody said I moved to that Daryl and Julie write this. How about if I make the statement?
No, we already did. We did.
Second.
All right. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Okay. Let's see. Are there any other? I can't think of. Those are the biggies. Water, septic.
And so, Daryl, I would also just note, since it sounds like we will have a quorum at the ZBA hearing, in the event that the unfortunate event that the hearing would close and the ZBA turned to us for conditions, we would be able to deliberate at that time to determine conditions, correct?
Yes.
Do we feel like we need to discuss that now, or that would be better when we have potentially more information by Monday?
If anyone has a condition on the top of your head, I don't know that
I
I
have some questions.
Okay.
With respect to just an information request about the homes, their design, the basements and attics, and just to make sure that those would be left unfinished, which I guess would be a condition, but not having information to even know how big they are.
So what we should do is also put together, well, we have a few things that have been identified in the meeting. So we do want to find out what the status is of the other spaces in the home besides the first and second finished floors that were provided to us, the floor plan. So what is going on with the basement and the attic spaces? So that's a question. Mark had, getting better map layers from Mark so he can review more precisely.
Yeah,
Um,
and even the profile are very important as well. The groundwater slash final grading profiles built around
yes.
the septic tank, pump chamber, and soil absorption system.
Okay, Mark, if you can just write that down in an email and send that, then oh, actually, maybe we should send ours to you and then you put it together and send it out as request.
That's fine, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Daryl, you had asked
right.
about the elevation for one of those wells. I think that was something you guys had flagged.
Yes, we need well, we've already expressed that they haven't documented groundwater flow direction adequately yet. And that's one of the cornerstones for both the mounding analysis and for the nitrogen fate and transport kind of analyses.
Sorry, I was thinking about one of the private wells that was potentially in the flood area with the recent high water. Yep, sorry.
Yep. Okay, so Mark, maybe we could put together that list of items that I've got various notes here.
That's fine. I'd be glad to work with you, Daryl, on that. That's
Oh, we didn't take a vote on the wells and the testing, whether it's that we would recommend all the wells be installed at once. We want simultaneous pump testing and also testing of nearby wells at the same time, monitoring for the impacts during the pump test. So there was that, but if they were to do it in a phased manner, then we'd have conditions. Is that something that we want to wait till we try and write that out in better detail? I think that'd be hard to just state succinctly now and completely.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of those things that, again, we'll write it up, review it, and we can vote on it to approve that recommendation at the ZBA meeting.
And can I clarify with Mark? Mark, are we asking for an extended pump time as well? Not just simultaneous pump, but extended?
I believe that would be the best way to do it, as we did at Abbey Road, do a 2-day pump down. I think an extended pump down flow test would be appropriate.
Yeah,
I have to get the language from Abbey Road. Yeah.
A usual target for projects in this range. Could be, I mean, if it was a PWS, the state would require longer, possibly. One other part of our regulations that would apply given the size of this project is earth removal in Regulation 3. But, you know, I haven't looked at that in a while, but there are some limits and I'd have to see what the section is. Mark, do you know it off the top of your head? It doesn't come up too often.
For earth removal?
Yeah.
I can't
Something
remember.
like
So many
350 or 1,000 cubic yards. I don't
I can
remember.
I thought it was 350 cubic yards, Daryl.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Yeah. And that issue is about not removing topsoil from the site without some kind of control, or preferably redistribution elsewhere on site, because I don't know if you've ever noticed, there are projects in neighboring towns where the first thing that happens is the topsoil gets stripped. It's easier to move heavy equipment around, get rid of that pesky humusy sort of thing, and then it doesn't always get replaced, and it reduces the amount of soil we have filtering waters that then are recharging our groundwaters is the basic issue with that. So. Or maybe we could take a look at that and just add that to the letter. Since it's almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah. I think we can look at that and add that in as a condition, Daryl. I mean, that seems reasonable to me.
Okay. All right. Let's see, we have let's move on to other business if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
Agenda items, okay. That's a listing of what we have so far. And we'll be starting on reviewing Washington Street at some point, but I think I'd like to get through Farm Road first.
And if I can just for the note, Julie, you were correct. It's 350 cubic yards of material per lot or 1,000 cubic yards of material per project under our EHIR number 3 regulations. Just to help out with that.
Yeah, oh, good. So there was a reason I had 2 numbers in my head.
350 per lot, 1,000 per project.
Okay. Good to know.
We'll add that as a condition. We'll keep that. As a
Yeah. All right. I think we're done for this evening. Unless someone knows what an agenda item might be on the next meeting. I'm kind of hoping we do get to talk about Farm Road more and about more information received about Farm Road. Would be great. Anybody else have thoughts about what would be at the next meeting? If not, any other? Oh.
No, I said, hopefully this we'll be able to talk about it again at the next regular meeting.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions from anyone, any of our guests, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
My whole family says yes. So moved.
Seconded.
Jeff?
Board of Health is worth every penny we pay you. So thank you very much.
Nothing, huh?
Okay, so hearing no objections, although those in favor.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
everyone, for your help.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.